what Senator Mitchell said was the profound difference between Barack Obama's economic policies and John McCain's economic policies is exactly the difference between Susan Collins' economic policies and mine. I'm with Barack, she's with John McCain. And you know that because in 2001 and 2003 and 2006, she voted down the line, unlike Olympia Snowe, for all those Bush tax cuts for the wealthiest people in the country. They are called the Bush tax cuts because he proposed them and she supported them. And in 2003, Susan Collins was the deciding vote. When John McCain was voting no, when Olympia Snowe was voting no, Susan voted yes, made the Senate 50-50 and allowed Dick Cheney to break the tie. And the consequence of that, next year in Maine, these huge tax breaks for people who have investment income. Let me contrast two stories. For the average person in Maine, and this is the average person earning about $1 million a year. There are not a lot of them. But the average person in Maine earning about $1 million a year will get a tax break of about $16,400 just from the investment tax cuts that Susan voted for in 2003. $16,400 if you're earning about $1 million. But if you're in the middle of the income spectrum in Maine, if you're earning about $40,000 a year, guess what you get on average? Not everyone gets it, but on average, you get 22 bucks. Not enough for half a tank of gasoline. So when I say the Bush tax cuts were weighted to the wealthy, that 2003 tax break especially, that's what I mean. It's the difference between 16,000 and 22 bucks for someone at the top and someone in the middle. And what that has done, a $4 trillion increase in the national debt in just 8 years. It is astonishing and it is crippling. It is crippling. If you want to know what brought us to the edge of financial disaster, it was the Republican philosophy, the Bush-McCain philosophy, the Bush-McCain-Collins philosophy of not interfering in markets. The markets will take care of everything. We don't need to do oversight and regulation of financial markets, number one. And number two, driving the country to the edge of financial disaster by doing tax breaks for the super wealthy that were so big and so extensive that they blew up the national debt and brought us to the place we are today, along with her support and McCain's support and Bush's support for the war in Iraq. We're at $600 billion and we're going to go well past $1 trillion put into that particular war. There's the second biggest factor driving up the national debt over the last 8 years. So when I travel around Maine, in Maine, George, it's 90% of the people in Maine think the country's headed in the wrong direction. 90%. They want change. Your job, my job, is to make sure they understand that if you want change, you have to vote for it. And a vote for someone who supported the Bush economic policies, who supported and still supports the President's policy in Iraq, who refused to do oversight on Halliburton and KBR and these private contractors in Iraq, and cost the American taxpayer close to $23 billion by not doing that oversight. That Susan Collins is not change. I am. Because what I've been fighting for, in the House, she's been more effective at passing the Bush tax cuts and promoting the war in Iraq and taking care of Halliburton, voting for the Cheney energy bill, the Medicare Part D, which is a financial bonanza for the pharmaceutical industry. She's been real good at doing that. But I've been fighting those policies because I believe in Maine the middle class comes first, and if we leave the middle class and the small business community behind in this state, we are in deep trouble, and we are in deep trouble. And you can say all you want about what any of us have done in this delegation to fight for people here in Maine. If you get the big decisions wrong, we pay a heavy price in Maine and across the country. And people who had nothing to do with that meltdown on Wall Street, nothing to do with the risk-taking that went on there, nothing to do with these financial policies, are paying a price today. And we have to turn in a different direction if we're going to make life better for the middle class here in Maine and people who would simply like a fighting chance to get into the middle class. So that's what my campaign is about. And I want to say this to you. We are in this game. I don't care what the polls say. We are in this game. We can win this race. It is going. I believe that, like Henry, we are leading. I believe we are winning the early vote. And so this is great, because this terrific field organization that we have, best ever in the state of Maine, can concentrate on those people who are undecided, who haven't voted yet, who lean towards Susan, but need more and better information about what she's done and what I've done. So that coordinated campaign, this phenomenal organization, if you all vote early, if you get your friends to vote early, you can concentrate on people who at the end of the day will really make a difference in this race. And I am very excited. The response I've had north, south, east, west is terrific. We need a few breaks. We've got to make this right all the way to the end, and we can win this race. So, my view is, don't ever be afraid to try something hard and never give up. And you can, like George Mitchell, get elected to the United States Senate when people think you can't. Now, one more thing that I have to say. I have to say it because I need you to understand my point of view about television ads that Susan Collins is running and what she's putting out for paper. It is personal, it is offensive, it is unfair. And here's what I'm talking about. Susan Collins has never missed a vote in her time in the United States Senate. And frankly, that's fine. She deserves to take credit for it. But she has no business running me down because I have only made 98% of the 7,500, well, actually more than that, 7,700 votes that have been cast in my 12 years. I work hard for the people of Maine. I work very hard. I am committed to this job. And I personally resent what she is doing to drag this campaign down, just as John McCain is trying to drag down Barack Obama by things that have nothing to do with people's health care or energy costs or their economy. Let me be clear about this. She's put up on the screen that I missed 157 votes. A lot of those votes, a quarter of them at least, were when my father was dying in 2001 and I needed to be with him. And when my mother was dying in 2003 and I needed to be with her. When my daughter got married, when my cousin Tim lost his wife and I went to the funeral. And this year when my wife Diana was going through diagnosis and treatment for breast cancer. I needed to be with her, and I was. And for Susan to make that an issue is a new low in Maine politics, and it needs to stop. And if anybody out there that you talk to, if anyone you talk to says, well, I'm not sure he shows up for work, then you tell them this story. I show up for work, I work hard, and what Susan Collins is doing by her allegations is fundamentally unfair and wrong. Now, that's the down note. Now, let me say where we're going. George was talking about what we can do if we move forward and we get a working majority in the United States Senate. And maybe it's 60 votes, or maybe it's 59, or maybe it's 58. But Barack Obama, to change this country, is going to have people who are committed to him, people who believe in his agenda for change. I do, Susan doesn't. She has a different policy on health care, a different policy on the economy, a different policy on Iraq. And if we're going to change the country, we have to begin here in Maine. That's what my race is about. That's why I got into this race. If anyone asks you why I left my seat in the House, it's because I couldn't stand what was happening in the country, and I believe we can change the country starting in Maine. That's why I'm here. That's why I hope you're in this room, and that's why I hope you'll do everything you can in the next 7 days to bring us to victory in my race, even in Henry's race, for Mike Michaud, for Barack Obama, and for Rosemary.